Hey everybody, welcome to another kind of sort of episode of Drive Through FM. Now I am recording this as if it's a podcast, just audio, but I will have a bunch of video and pictures and stuff like that going up. So I'll put it out in both ways, but it's mostly just going to be a podcast of me talking, and then I'll show you some pictures of some video game things and videos of playthroughs and stuff like that, and that'll all be properly credited below in the description. But today, I wanted to talk through some more video game stuff, some JRPG stuff, and then kind of talk a little bit about the little kind of sidebar journey I've been on. I'll put some links below. I did a video several months ago about all the JRPGs I played last year. It was like 25 or so in 2024. And then I recently posted a review of Breath of Fire for the Super Nintendo, but it was like a fan-translated mod. It had some other gameplay tweaks and stuff. So I'll put links to those below in case you missed those. And then today, the reason I'm doing this is because, I got some board games to review. Those are coming up. But I've also spent the last couple of weeks playing through a board game called Vantage, which I ended up not really liking. And frankly, my group's a little bit mixed on it, but mostly, kind of come down on the negative side. And I've seen a lot of discussion online. Some people think it's the game of the year. Other people really can't stand it. And everything in between. So I've effectively, from a content creation standpoint, wasted my time. It's totally fine. But it's just like, I was kind of planning to review this because I wanted to like it. But like now I don't have anything to review or talk about. And I've been wanting to sort of do a little bit of a talk or catch up or whatever update on some of the stuff, because I got a lot of good feedback from especially that initial JRPG video, multi-review type of thing. And so I went off on some different other tangents and rabbit holes, and none of it really falls into any kind of real nice, succinct set of reviews. Or there's some of these games I'm gonna talk about that I finished, I'm like, who needs another Metroid review? You know what I mean? Like, in the world. So I'm just gonna talk briefly about some games. I do have a sort of the beginnings of a concept of something related to some of the really early DOS games, some of the text adventure games and that kind of thing, which I've just kind of scratched the surface of. And they feel very board gamey, but I want to kind of dive into that a little bit and maybe just do like an episode on that and kind of the intersection of some of the early, especially the DOS games or Commodore 64 games, that kind of thing. Maybe if you had an Apple II back in the early 80s and stuff, and how they were very board game-ish in a way. But yeah, so that might be coming down the road here. But I figured let me just catch you up and then kind of whine at some people that gave me the idea, which sent me down a rabbit hole. So when I did the original JRPG video, several people said to me, hey, you got to check out the Nintendo 3DS and the DS and look at those games, because last year I went through, played a lot of games. Most games are available these days like on PC, even like remakes. They do like HD remasters, that kind of thing. Or you can play on like a virtual console thing, like on the Switch or different things like that. So some of the older school games I had played on there. But you don't really see anything kind of remade for the 3DS or the 2DS because it's got a two-screen solution and all this kind of stuff. And so I started looking into it, and I kind of looked at emulating them, on my PC. And that is just not the way to play them, because they have a 2D screen or two screens, and they're touch screens. At least the bottom screen is the touchscreen on the DS and the 2DS. So trying to control everything with like a normal Bluetooth controller, and then like you have your mouse, click it and stuff. So long story short, I mentioned in my Breath of Fire review, I bought a 3DS, modded it. Actually, I got a new 3DS LL from Japan, some store in Japan off of eBay. Really good deal. and then got it, modded it, region unlocked it so it could be all English, and then was able to try some of these games. And so you can load up like emulators on there. You can get some 3DS games that are no longer in print. I'm totally not hunting down physical copies of these games because the prices for these are completely insane right now. They had kind of a COVID spike, and I think it's never ever come off of it. To try to track down some of the cartridges. I mean, some of them are like absolutely bonkers, like hundreds of dollars. So it's like, oh, okay, I can put these on here, and I don't have any moral compunction about that because they don't exist. There's nowhere to buy them from. And so I started playing with that, and I've played, dinked around with some 3DS games, and so it got me into that, and that's kind of how I played Breath of Fire. Was on there, which I had tried on the Switch, but it's kind of bad, like the original. But the modded one that has like a retranslation and a couple other like level scaling things, so you don't have to grind as much. Like this, it's the same difficulty. It's just you get, twice the reward for grinding a random mob, and so it just makes it more enjoyable. So anyway, that kind of started the rabbit hole of these folks that watched that video that said you got to check out the 3DS, and I was like, holy cow! And there is a whole ton of cool RPGs and other games for the 3DS and the 2DS. And so that got me just kind of like in this little rabbit hole. So, and I should say it got me in this rabbit hole of like these little, retro handheld types of things. So I got the 3DS, modded it, had fun with that for a couple of months. And then, as I was kind of Googling around and YouTubing around, I found that there's kind of a relatively, vibrant, healthy scene of YouTubers and just online areas like on Discord and Reddit and places like that where they discuss these kind of things, and they have the same level of over obsessive consumerism that exists in the board game space as well, but there's also plenty of sanity in there as well. So what I did is I got this thing called a Battle XP G350, and what it is, it's a cheap. I got it for $35, and it is sort of a knockoff, but it's not really a knockoff. But it came highly recommended from a lot of the different YouTubers and people in general. And I said, let me get this really cheap one to sort of play with. And I put my own custom, not my custom operating system, but I found a custom operating system and put that on there, and then dinked around with it and just, set up some different emulators on there. And it is a really cool handheld. And it's nice because you can kind of set up the front end. And so it's like when you launch it, it's sort of like a canned application with an easy to use front end. You can browse through systems and find the games and play them and favorite them. And, all your saves are on there. And for $35, I mean, this is a great little handheld device. And I would recommend it. I'm gonna recommend all these handhelds I'm gonna talk about, except for probably one of them, which I'll get to. But I mean, for $35, this was absolutely perfect, and I would probably still have it, except for the screen is a little small for me. It's a 3.5-inch square-ish screen. I think it's a 4:3 ratio. I'm not exactly sure. But I'll have links to all these devices so you can go check them out. There's no affiliates or anything like that. I'm just sharing information here. And it was great. It was because it has like the two little sticks at the bottom, plus the control pad and the D-pad and all that stuff. And so, if you wanted to play like an arcade game on it, having the little stick is nice, or having PlayStation 1 games that it will run. So it basically will run everything really early up to about PlayStation 1. And I think I got did I get Saturn working on there? I don't remember, but this was a while ago. But it's really cool. But for me, for my old man eyes, the screen's just a little too small. That 3.5 inches is just a little too small for me. So I basically got rid of it, sold it. I had it all customized and everything. So I was actually just, able to get rid of it pretty easily, because a lot of people don't like to, mess with installing operating systems and everything. Because the default operating system that comes on it is, I don't think I would recommend it with that, because, sure, it's fine. And you get like a bunch of ROMs on these, which is, not super legal and kind of icky. So I like to wipe them and then put my own stuff on there. But a lot of people like to do the same thing, and they don't want like the default OS on there. So if I've already gone through the hassle of putting the operating system on there, which is super easy, but people can't be bothered, and I'm a software guy by trade, so I think it could be intimidating for people. So I was able to kind of flip that one. And then I sort of upgraded it to this Anbernic 40XXV, which is great. It's really great. And this one I would still have. It's kind of weird because it's basically the same ballpark as that Battle XP. And it only has one stick, which is all you really need for what you can emulate. Because it's about the same level of power. You know, you can do the Nintendo, the Genesis, Super Nintendo, Game Boy stuff, PlayStation 1. I'm pretty sure I got Dreamcast and Saturn stuff working on there. And you don't really need a dual joystick for a lot of those games. You just need the one, so it's fine. And then, you know, it's cool. And it has a 4-inch screen, which is perfect. That's fine. I was good to go with that. I would probably still have that. I recommend this one. I also put a custom OS on this one. I think it was Mu OS on this. Sorry, I didn't give the OS on the other one. I put MU OS on this one, and then I put Arc OS on the Battle XP. I should have said that. But, and so I put that on there. It was great. It was perfect. And this one is a little bit extra. I think I got it for $55. And that was like a sale. And it's nice because this one has, you can do Bluetooth if you want to like actually plug it into your TV and sort of like dock it, which I did, and it worked good. And also it has Wi-Fi. So that I didn't really make use of other than, you know, I was able to download some stuff while I was setting it up, which made it useful. But once it's all set up, like the Wi-Fi is sort of useless. But the Bluetooth thing was nice because I could plug it in the TV and I could play like an old arcade game, but blown up on my TV. It looked really cool. And I had like a Bluetooth controller I could use. So this one is definitely, I would say, you know, the Battle XP I got just to kind of play with, just because I didn't want to buy like some super expensive one and be like, oh, I don't really like this, you know, modding retro handhelds and configuring them and setting them up. But I did like it. So, but like I said, this has got that little step up, a little extra bells and whistles and, you know, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and a bigger screen. And the screens are really, really nice. So I had that one and I just got rid of that one recently. But, you know, it kind of started a rabbit hole a little bit. The next thing I did is I have a Switch or had a Switch and then modded it. Now, modding a Switch is not like modding a 3DS. Modding a 3DS is relatively easy. You can do it all through kind of software or little hacks. There's some great guides to doing that. I think, you know, not everybody, but a lot of people could do the 3DS on their own. For the Switch, because I had kind of a newer version Switch, you have to actually solder in a special chip and all this, and I don't have any experience doing anything like that. So I found a guy that would do it for me, and so he put the chip in, and then I was able to kind of go from there and do all the software stuff, put the custom firmware on there, actually install Android on my Switch, which I wanted to do because the way my setup kind of works prior to having all these handhelds is I just have a PC and I had my Switch, but I also have this NVIDIA Shield box. So I was using the Switch less and less and less because on my TV I would stream from my PC via Steam Link. Everybody says you use Moonlight and Artemis and stuff, but I don't know. Those seem to be really janky and don't work, but Steam Link works beautiful. So I basically stream any game to my PC, to my TV. So I don't really like to sit and play video games on my computer because I work from home and I, you know, work at my computer, and then I'm like, oh, I'm still at my computer. You know, like when I'm playing video games, it kind of sucks. And so it was nice to just stream, you know, all these games over to my TV. So the nice thing is I was like, oh, you can mod your Switch, you can put Android on it, then I can install Steam Link on it and stream it to that. So I've got like this nice handheld that I can stream from my PC, because that's something that I had seen in a lot of these different retro handhelds is people like actually doing just streaming. They don't even, you know, have emulators or stuff like that. They get kind of a nicer kind of mid-range handheld device, or even like some of those big PCs like the Steam Deck and the ROG Ally and all those are like hundreds of dollars. I was like, oh, I could just mod my Switch and stream it. And I liked it, but the Switch is a very old chipset. It's actually kind of a miracle device in a way, that stuff that it actually can run, because it's old, man. It's like 10 years old or something at this point. I don't even remember how old it is. But so it worked and it was fine, but it just wasn't like a great experience. And the version of Android on there is like, it's okay. And you get other benefits from modding a Switch, but I don't really care about that. So I actually got rid of that, but that got me keyed up to want to get like a proper Android device, because so far these others, the 3DS and the Switch, they're their own thing, and then the Battle XP and the Ambernic, those are Linux devices, Unix devices. And so that's cool. So I was like, let me try out an Android device. And so then I got into, which I still have now, is this Retroid Pocket Flip 2. And it kind of looks like a 3DS, but it flips up. But there's only one screen, and it's a pretty beefy little Android handheld. And the size of the screen is basically like a Switch Lite. It's a 5.5-inch screen, and I've been really enjoying this thing. Now, just a caveat with that: if you think about getting a Flip 2, do not get anything other than the ice blue color, because there is an issue with the hinges cracking on the other colors, especially the black, which I had. And the Retroid folks actually exchanged it for free with me for an ice blue, which is kind of like a transparent color, which was kind of my second choice anyway. And those don't seem to have the issue with the hinge cracking. So I don't know what the status is on the other colors and the other plastics, but yeah, so far so good with my ice blue one. And that's a really cool device. So I'm kind of like right there with it. So right now I've got the Flip 2 and also the 3DS, which is modded. Now, that announced was an AYN Thor, which is basically going to combine those two devices, because it's basically a Flip 2, but with a little bit more power and a second screen. And I'm like, okay, now I could just get down to one device. So I may get rid of the 3DS and the Flip 2, and then just sort of upgrade both of them into an AYN Thor. But we'll see, tariffs, and I don't know. Like, I don't know what's happening, because I don't want to pay an extra $100 for something that I don't really need. So anyway, that is quite a bit of preamble to kind of just sort of explain where my little journey has bounced me around, and sort of the side effect of kind of playing around with these different devices and the different systems and emulators, and just trying out a bunch of different games that I've never would have tried out. You cannot find these. They don't exist. They're not on like anybody's virtual console or anything like that. I've actually kind of discovered a kind of an interesting thing that you can do. Found some of these older games that are very interesting in the sense of, how do I explain this right? They don't really feel, well, this is how I'll say it. I don't really feel the same way about these video games as I kind of used to, because, playing, like, for example, just like a Game Boy game or a Game Boy Color game. And the one example I'll use here is there's a game called Donkey Kong 94. It depends on the version you have. So if you're in Europe or US, so it's basically the Game Boy version of Donkey Kong, but it is not Donkey Kong. It is something completely different, and it is really, really cool. And I highly recommend everybody check it out. I haven't finished it yet, but it's a great little game, because it's one of those games where you can actually pick up and play it for 5 minutes, and then put it away, and then come back to it the next day or in a week and play it again. And it is various different levels. So if you've played some of the older Super Mario games where you're in World 1, World 2, 2-2, 2-3, and you get all the way to World 8 and finish the game, it's kind of set up like that. But the levels are not like side-scrolling, adventure type of things. They're these really kind of cool sort of thinky puzzles where you've got to say, oh, I've got to flip this switch and do that. And everything basically fits onto one screen, maybe a couple of screens, but it's not like a big sprawling level that you're running down and things like that. It's got a little bit of dexterity and a little bit of like, thinky, order of operations type of thing. And I'm like, God, this is such a neat little game. And, you can save your game. So I think I'm on World 4 currently. So I've been playing it off and on. It's such a cool, like, breath of fresh air. It's such a neat little thing. And I totally recommend people just check it out. Whatever means you have to check it out, check it out. Such a cool, awesome little puzzle. And I think there also is a Game Boy Advanced sequel, which I apologize. Yeah, I wanted to look it up. It's Mario versus Donkey Kong on the Game Boy Advance. And it's a very similar game to the one I'm talking about here, which is like called Donkey Kong 94. I think it's just called Donkey Kong 2 for the Game Boy. Anyway, so it's weird. It's just like this weird little puzzly thing that is so cool. And I'm like, man, they just do not make games like this anymore. Maybe they do. I just don't know about them. But so it kind of got me on this little bit of a rabbit hole. And so one of the things that I've done here, I will get to some JRPGs in a minute, but I actually played through. I got this random. Okay, I got this random idea. So some of my friends, we have like a group chat, and we started talking about this. And Donkey Kong 94 was actually recommended to me by a friend. He's like, "Man, I found this great game and all this stuff." And then another friend of mine, Matt, he he's like, "You know what? I went and tried to play the original Metroid." And I was like, yeah, I love Metroid. I love the old games. I played the original on the NES and then the SNES, and those are some of my favorite games from that era. Like if you held a gun to my head and you said, what was kind of your favorite thing? And I would pick Metroid over Mario and Zelda and that kind of stuff because I just love that kind of vibe of those games. It's like creepy, going through tunnels and figuring out puzzles and, trying to like, you kind of hit like a dead end. Be like, God, how do I get through here? So you're like, okay, well, let me go, through the rest of the game, and maybe something will clue me off, and I can come back to this later. And I love that kind of style of gameplay. And so he mentioned that, so I kind of started looking, and then it was like, oh, they did a remake of it, of the original, because the original, excuse my language here, the original for the Nintendo, I played it for like a couple of minutes. I'm like, okay, this is dog shit. I was like, this is not good, but they remade it for the Game Boy Advance as something called Zero Mission. So it's the exact same kind of story or whatever, same gameplay, but it's totally improved and enhanced. If I could give a game 10 out of 10, it would be Zero Mission. It is so cool. It's like the perfect level of difficulty, the perfect level of frustration, the perfect level of like balancing, puzzle with dexterity, with cool boss fights and all that kind of thing, and little splashes of story and all that stuff. So I started to get into it, and I was like, okay. So I started Googling around looking for, hey, what are some other good Metroid games? Because like maybe they've remade some of these other ones. Maybe, I don't know. At the time, I didn't know. I was like, maybe they remade the Super Nintendo one, because that was like my favorite, that second game, or third game, actually. So I started looking around. No, they've not remade that one. But I was like, what's the like chronological timeline of Metroid? Like, how does this work? Because, I started playing through last year the East games and the Trails games, and I got really into that. And so it was very interesting. So the first game in the series is basically Zero Mission or the original, regular Nintendo version. So that's the first one in the story. And I found a thing that has like a whole timeline. And there's actually like a manga that is, which I scanned through. You can find it online, and I don't know if it was ever brought to the U.S. or if it was just translated, but I found a PDF that had, basically, it's like two mangas, and it's sort of a prequel to Zero Mission. Talks about Samus and her upbringing, and then how she was sort of taken in as an orphan, that kind of thing, and how she ended up working for the Federation and all that. And then it kind of coincides with the events of Zero Mission. I was like, oh, that's neat. It's not very good. The manga, like, it's okay. I mean, it's about Metroid. So, but it was cool. I was like, oh, this is a little interesting backstory for Samus. And so then it coincides in Zero Mission. So I played Zero Mission, loved it. Like I said, it's beautiful. It's a perfect game if there ever was one as far as video games go. And then the next one in the sort of chronological order is Prime, which came out originally on the GameCube and then remade on the Wii, and then recently remade on the Switch, the remastered one. And so, and they remade it on the Wii as the trilogy. So there's Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3. And so Prime is actually the second game in the chronological thing. So I was like, oh, sweet, I'll play that one. And I played that. That one is, if I gave Zero Mission 10 out of 10, I give Prime probably an 8 or 9 out of 10. Because it's really great. The level of sort of, I'm going to struggle with words here for a minute, but like the realism of the environments is something else. Because, you play a lot of these first-person shooters, and Prime is a first-person. So there's a jump from, like, the 2D side-scrolling Metroid into the 3D, first-person shooter Prime. But it's more like, I don't know, Half-Life in a way, Half-Life 2 maybe, where it's a little bit more puzzly-oriented than a full-on, like, run-and-gun shooter. Because it's not like a Doom or a Quake or whatever, or Call of Duty, where you're just, like, killing tons of things. There is a kind of a little bit of almost like platforming where you jump around and figure out puzzles and stuff. So it's really good. My only problem with it is there was one super obtuse part I never would have figured out. And I had to look it up, and I hate looking up stuff. And in my opinion, I don't know, I probably should have figured this out on my own, but it was very like strange. It was basically like, oh, you have to do this to this door, and then you have to do something else. I'm like, how would I have guessed that? Because nothing like would ever indicate that you had to do like two things, because you get these like different weapons that'll unlock different doors. And there was one part where I had to do two things, and I was like, that was fine. So that sort of bugged me. I'm like irked already, but I was like, I forgive it. I'm a kind of a dummy. Maybe I should have figured it out. And then there's a lot of like what I said about in the Game Boy Advance game, where it's like, oh, you get to this part and you're like, I don't know how to get any further. I'm going to go back to the other side of the world and figure this out and come back. But that happens so much in this game, and it's like, okay, I know where I need to go, and it's like, oh my god, I've got to run through the entire game to get to the other side, and I'm like, this sucks. Can I just teleport, please? Just give me a teleporter, because I don't want to have to run. I know exactly what I have to do. It's going to take me like 20 minutes to get to the other side of the game. So that's where it kind of shaves off a little bit. But other than that, those are kind of nitpicks. I don't think they're real nitpicks. I think they're just, it's kind of clunky in that way. But it's really good. Like I said, the immersion of, to my initial point there, of the realism of how the environments sort of blend into each other, and the level design, it's so seamless. Where a lot of times you can kind of see the design on the sleeve. You're like, okay, this level begins and ends here, and this is how it works. And so you're able to kind of spatially parse it very easily. Whereas in this one, it's not always the case. It's like, oh, it feels very natural how things kind of blend in. And as you kind of discover like these different artifacts and things like that you have to unlock, the seamlessness of it is just really astounding to me. And I've heard that the other two are even better. So that was cool. So now my point with this is I've played now a GBA game, now a GameCube/Wii game, and then the third game in the sort of chronological timeline was Metroid Prime Hunters, which is a 2DS, a DS game. And it's also like a 3D game, but instead of controlling it with a controller all the way, you have a little touch screen at the bottom that is kind of like your mouse, your looking mouse. And then you go through there, and then that's a cool game too. So what I've liked about this is now, okay, I've decided to play through this series chronologically. What it's allowing me to do is touch on all these kind of different gameplay styles and different systems that I can play on. I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun, because I jumped from a Game Boy game to a Wii game and now to a 2DS game. And that's been a kind of a cool experience to just sort of jump around and touch on these kind of different gameplay experiences, and kind of through the guise of like, oh, I'm kind of playing through this chronological thing. Now, my quick review of the Metroid Prime Hunters on 2DS is, this is tricky. As you know, they've kind of gone down. So 10 out of 10, maybe 8, 9 out of 10. And I'd say this was probably a 7 or 8 out of 10. Now, the only problem with Prime Hunters that I have is the control scheme. And it's kind of a dual-edged sword. Because to me, it's really amazing that they were able to provide a mostly comfortable, mostly seamless way to play a first-person shooter on a 2-screen setup like that with the little, stylus, and it works really well, and it's a lot of fun. I will say the graphics kind of show their age, and this is where I would have liked to maybe have played it on an emulator or something to kind of increase the resolution, but I was playing it natively on the 3DS that I have, and the graphics are like, they're like, they're of their time. I mean, of their time they were probably fine, but it's like some of the stuff is like a little confusing to see. I'm like, well, what is that? Because it's kind of pixely and janky, but okay, that's fine. It's of its time. The other part is like some of the boss fights in certain parts of the game, like, man, my right hand, which is what I was using to control the stylus, would just cramp right up, because you're trying to, figure out the pattern of the boss, jump around and get that, and try to be dexterous with your movements. It's like, okay, on my third attempt now, I'm only losing because my hand is cramping. I need to set the thing down. And some of these bosses had like too much hit points, where it's like, okay, guys, I figured out the pattern. Thank you. Now let me just finish this and move on. Because now the only reason I'm dying is because my hand is cramping the hell. And so, but again, it's like I said, it's also kind of a miracle that they did this, because, as you're moving through the levels and jumping around and flying through stuff and fighting little enemies, it's a lot of fun. And it works really, really well. It's just, you get to some of these boss fights and it gets frustrating. And the other thing that it does is, that's interesting is it also has like a PvP aspect to it. And I have checked it out. I haven't really played around too much with it, but there is a Discord for it for Metroid Prime Hunters, and there's like some third-party servers that are set up, so I can see there's some activity online, and it looks like it's a lot of fun. In the single-player game, there are like sort of PvP pseudo elements where these other hunters are kind of on the same mission as you, so to speak, and you have these little like sort of mini walled off little level sections of the game. The game will kind of like switch into a different mode, like another hunter will come down, the doors will all kind of lock around you, and you're kind of like in an arena, so to speak, and then you're fighting them, and they behave less like a mindless NPC or boss, and they kind of jump around and use different skills on you and stuff. So it's kind of a faux PvP environment, and that was a lot of fun, fighting those things. That was actually pretty cool, and my hand didn't get too cramped in those parts. So anyway, so that's fun, So I kind of just rabbit holed that on my once friend sort of suggesting, oh yeah, remember Metroid? And I was like, oh yeah. And now I'm able to play through some of these different systems, which is very neat, which a lot of these different handhelds will support. So you can kind of jump around very easily with this. And a couple other series I want to start is there's a whole timeline for the Castlevania games, which I enjoyed. So I kind of started the first one, and that is actually on PlayStation 2. And it is, I'd say, objectively a very mediocre game. But it's not bad. Like, it's fun. It's kind of interesting how they converted Castlevania to kind of a Devil May Cry, almost Souls-like. Like, it's not difficult like a Souls-like, but there is a sort of an early element there to that Castlevania. I think it's called Dawn of Sorrows. Oh, sorry, not Dawn of Sorrows. That's a different one. Lament of Innocence. So I've played it through a little bit of that, and like, it's pretty good. It's not great. I'm kind of looking forward to getting to other ones down the road in the timeline that are like on the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy, frankly. So that'll be an interesting thing. And then also the Zelda timeline, and the first one in the Zelda timeline. And I didn't know this. All the Zeldas actually have a timeline. Actually, the Mario games too, but I'm not going to be bothered with that. I like Mario games quite a bit, but I'm not. I looked at some of the timelines. I'm like, okay, yeah, you guys are totally stretching. There's no timeline here. You're just making this all up. But for Zelda, there actually is, and there's the first one in the timeline. There is Skyward Sword, which I believe was a Wii game, and there's a remake on the Switch for that. And I played through a little bit of that too, just kind of off the side, and that is a lot of fun. I really am enjoying the Skyward Sword. It's very, very cool. Like, I don't want to get into it too much, but it's super quirky and different from a lot of the other Zeldas. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so let's just take a little break here, and we'll jump into the old Donkey Kong Country medley, and then come back and we'll talk some more JRPG stuff. Okay, so the first game to talk about that is almost a JRPG. I think it is one, but this company is called Quintet, and funnily enough, they made 5 different games for the Super Nintendo. So they made a quintet of Quintet games. Although they also made another one which is a sequel, which I'll get to in a minute. So they basically have made 6 games, but they made 5 in like 5 different sort of IPs. And the first one in the series is called Actraiser. And this is a game I actually played and beat as a kid. And I did it again, and it's really weird. And the game that I will not play when I go through the series is the sequel to it. I might play it, but it throws off the whole 5-game, quintet. And I've heard it's probably the worst game out of the 5, so I might just skip it. But the first game, Actraiser, is a weird blend of like a sim, like a city building game, and a 2D side-scrolling RPG. And both games kind of inform the other. And so the idea is that you are some like god that's been asleep, and you're kind of going in and sort of restoring the land, which is totally overrun by monsters and evil things. And so you go down and you fight through one level, and you clear out the bad guy, and then you're able to establish like an Adam and Eve type of situation or something. And then they start building a city, and then you manage that. You help them build and fight monsters. And I mean, the city building is like super light. Like, don't get carried away here. It's like the lightest of lightest. And you're a little avatar of an angel, flies around and kills monsters that are trying to harass people and kidnap them. And then you kind of unlock little technologies, and then you unlock different kind of magics that you can use when you go back into the 2D side-scrolling part. And so every world, or every sort of like little place of the continent, I think there's like 6 of them or something. There's basically the city building part, and then there's 2 side-scrolling sort of RPGs levels that each have a boss at the end. And it's actually quite fun. It is probably ridiculously easy once you kind of get the hang of it, in the moving around and stuff, and all the platforming stuff. It's not very hard at all. I don't think so. Until the final boss, which is like a giant boss run of like 7 bosses in a row, and you basically have to do it on like one sort of loadout. So if you've got, because you get sort of these queued up magical abilities you can use, and so you've got to make use of them throughout all 7 bosses or whatever it is. And you've only got like one sort of life pool and health pool. So I think you have by the time you get there, you probably have 3 lives that you can use through a level, and so you've got to make all those last. You can't you don't beat a boss and then reset your lives or reset your health. Like, you'll take over whatever health you had left on your current life and all that. So you've got to do that. And that is like a huge difficulty spike, especially since the game got, some of the bosses are like ridiculous easy. There's a magic that you can get, which like has these little like falling stars and comets or whatever. And you can sometimes like, 2-hit a boss doing that. It's like, oh, if I get in the right spot and hit this, special ability, it's like, okay, the boss is dead. It's too easy. But, some of the levels are harder than the boss. But other than that, it's mildly fun. It probably took me, it's hard to track because the thing doesn't really track your thing, probably 6 to 8 hours. And that's what the howlongtobeat.com website says it takes. And I feel like that's probably how long it took me. But it's fun. I liked it. And it's kind of an interesting, it's strangely engaging in the sense of like, you go in, you kind of beat back all of the evil, and then you go into a little city building thing and you fight off little pests to let your these citizens sort of develop and learn new abilities and give you special items that you can then take back to other parts of the continent. Like, this place will discover, I don't know, fur, and then you can go give it to the people in the cult base, and other people will develop like a new better way of farming, so you can get that and you distribute that to the other places. So then your population will grow much faster, and your level is directly tied to your population, not anything that you do in the game. So leveling up your character for the 2D fighting is all tied into your city building. And like I said, it's all pretty easy and fun, but it's cool. It's just a very weird, interesting, quirky thing. So the next game, which I just started, was called Soul Blazer. It feels like it has a weirdly similar vibe. And then there's Illusion of Gaia and Robotrek and Terranigma. So those are the 5 games that they made for the Super Nintendo. And I've heard that all of them are good. So I'm like, okay, that's another kind of quirky way to play through games. And none of these others I played. I played Actraiser as a kid, but none of those other ones I listed I've really even heard of. And they all look like weird, funky variants on like the JRPG sort of style. Like, they're not traditional at all. So I'm very keen to try to give them a try, because this, city building plus 2D side scrolling, like, what is that? What is that marriage there? So, but I have heard that the sequel, Actraiser 2, which I believe was like the biggest selling out of them anyway, is also not good and like not really of the same spirit as some of these others. So I might try it later on, but I mean, it seems to be kind of unanimously considered bad. Okay, so that was Actraiser. The next one, I'm playing through. So on my 3DS, I actually figured out that I can play through all of the Dragon Quest games 1 through 9 on the single device. And so I've already last year I beat the Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior, whatever you call it, on the Switch, the first one, which is the 3rd time I beat it in my life. And because initially I had beat it on the regular Nintendo, as a kid, and then I played that same version on an emulator or something years and years ago and beat it again. I was like, oh, look at this. I can play this. It was fun. And then I beat it on the Switch last year. And then now I played the Game Boy Color version on the 3DS. And that is actually a combo game, Dragon Warrior 1 and 2. So I beat both of those. Dragon Warrior 1 is difficult because it's like I can do that in my sleep. Like I don't even need somebody to give me a clue. I'm just like, yeah, now I have to go here and then go here. It's like it's just all memorized. But it's still fun. Like it's cool. And I do know that the original Dragon Quest 2 for the Nintendo is absolute hot dog water and completely ridiculous in terms of difficulty. But apparently they've all fixed it in Dragon Warrior 2 for the Game Boy Color, and that is so far been considered probably like one of the best ways to play it until the forthcoming Dragon Warrior 1 and 2 that's being put out like as a HD 2D remaster, which I'm going to get and play through them again because I really enjoy the Dragon Quest games. So I beat that, and I would say my review of it is 1 was obviously fun. It's just like an old comfort sandwich or something, and 2 was there was a couple of really, I don't know, like really dumb puzzles that were like, how would people figure this out? And so one of them was like you had to go and like search this exact right tile, and the game was just not very clear about that. So I had to look up like 2 things with it, and I was like, this is dumb, guys. You shouldn't make things like this this complicated. Like, and not like provide a little bit more direction. So it's 2 little stupid puzzle things, and it wasn't even like puzzles. Like I don't even know what to do next in the game. It's just like I'm totally stuck. I don't know where I know what I'm supposed to do, but I have no idea where to go. And it was annoying. But I will say the saving grace of it is the final there's like a kind of a huge dungeon, and then kind of a little mini dungeon that kind of like your last sort of level, so to speak. That was cool, and there's the last couple of bosses which were I think appropriately difficult. I thought those were really good. So I would still recommend the game, and I hope that they fix with the remaster coming out some of that, directionless feeling. Because other than that, those couple of moments, it was like really neat. It was fun to explore and all that stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm currently working through Dragon Quest 3 on the Game Boy Color, which I beat last year for the first time. I never played 3 or 2. But I never played 3 until last year with the HD 2D remaster. And that was one of the best games I've ever played as well. Talk about a 10 out of 10. The HD 2D remaster for Dragon Quest 3 is friggin' awesome. And I'm really enjoying it on the Game Boy Color. Like I get it. It's cool. I can see some of the similarities and all that stuff. But, if you're asking me to recommend, I'm like, get the HD 2D remaster. Forget the Game Boy Color one. But the next one on the list is Dragon Quest 4, which is a 2DS game. So 4, 5, and 6 are 2DS games. And from what I've read, that's probably the best way to play it. And then 7 and 8 are 3DS games. And then 9 goes back to 2DS. So I'm like, oh, that's also a fun way to play the game. Because again, I'll be touching on all these different systems. So a couple of Game Boy Color games, some 2DS games, some 3DS games. It's kind of a neat way to play it, and I'm kind of a sucker for Dragon Quest. So I played those recently, 1 and 2, and I'm working on 3. And then finally, the last game, catching back up to some of the stuff I was working on last year, or playing through last year, is the Trails to Azure. Now, this is the 5th game in the Trail series, and I've just fallen head over heels for the whole series. It's just big, long. I think they're up to 13 games, and they're all like chronologically in order, and there's a big sort of general plot that goes through all 13 games. It's like I saw somebody call it the other day the One Piece of JRPGs, and I've never watched One Piece, but it sounds like it. It's this big epic, like never-ending adventure thing. And you do shift like main characters every couple of games, so this was the end of a 2-part series. Let's start with Trails to Zero, or Trails from Zero, something like that, and then Trails to Azure, and it's absolutely the best game, I think, that I've played in the series so far. I'm still kind of partial to Trails in the Sky second chapter, which is the second game in the whole series. But this one is great. And I think I figured out kind of the way to play this because I played through that first like 4 games last year, and it was frankly kind of burnt out because I don't think you're really meant to play them so close together, because if you were playing them in real time as they were released, you'd play one game and then like, a year and a half, 2 years later, you'd play the second game. And so you wouldn't burn out as quick. But I was like, oh man, I played 4 of these in a row. I'm burnt out. That sucks because I really enjoy them. But the way that I've kind of been playing it, and I've started Cold Steel, which is the next game, and that's a whole new arc, is to play it sort of episodically. Like play it maybe like once a week for a couple of hours. It's almost like you're watching an episode, of an anime or a TV show. And I found that, like, yeah, and that's kind of how I played the last part of Trails to Azure, and kind of off and on with these other video games. And then you kind of get close to the end, and then it's like, okay, now I really want to see the end. So I'm able to kind of binge watch into the last, 10 hours of the game or whatever. And so I found that that's pretty enjoyable, because some of my criticisms of the games, of the Trails games, have been just kind of the long-windedness of the dialogue and stuff like that. It's like, man, stop talking. But I also, on the other hand, like, I'm really kind of enjoying the information that's being conveyed, the character development, the plot, and the little shifts, and the plot twists and all that. I'm like, it's so weird, and I'm really enjoying this, but I just am not enjoying the consumption of it. Now, starting with Cold Steel, there is English voice acting. So that has made it already a little bit easier to digest, because with the first 3 in the Trails in the Sky trilogy, there was no voice acting at all. It was just pure reading. And my God, that's rough. In the second 2, with Zero and Azure, there was Japanese voice acting, which helps, because even though I don't understand what they're saying, I can read it, but I get the emotional sort of weight of the voice acting delivery. And that does help. And honestly, it helps quite a bit. And I don't even know how to explain this, but I feel like the voice acting was like really well done in Zero and Azure. But I have no idea. But I'm like, okay, I felt something. Like when a certain character will like laugh or get upset or get a little bit down, it's like I'm still feeling it. And so that helps. But so my point with that is, it's like, man, I wish they could have delivered this in a different way. And even with Cold Steel, it's still kind of wordy. But if I don't try to consume and burn through the whole game at once, because there's a desire to do it, because I am enjoying how things are unfolding and developing. But again, the wordiness is sort of fighting against that. But again, if I make myself just take my time, play a couple hours a week, then it's much easier to digest, and I'm kind of enjoying it. So I feel like that's the way to play these games for me anyway, because then I find myself like skipping dialogue, and I'm like, well, this sucks, because I'm probably going to miss something doing this, or some little, detail or something about a character, and I want those. So anyway, so that's how to do that there. So yeah, that's the trail stuff. I'm going to keep grinding through this thing, and we'll see. It maybe take a couple of years, but I'll get through it. I'm enjoying it though. So that's pretty much it, just to recap there. And like I said, towards the beginning there, I do have some thoughts for kind of some of these early sort of more text-driven adventures. I've been able, through all of those devices and stuff I talked about at the beginning, I found some videos about kind of setting up like a MS-DOS virtual machine, which I've got set up. And a lot of those games are just free to download. I mean, there's not even like there's no like theft or whatever involved. They're all just up on abandonware, and they've just been released and able to get. And so I have some early of those Infocom games like Zork and Deadline and some other ones. And then like some of the early Ultimas and stuff like that. Well, those I purchased on GOG, Google Games. But and the interesting thing about these is some sort of the supplementary materials, especially with those Infocom games. And even the early Ultimas, where, and I kind of would make this point about some of the games I talked about today, where like you need the manual to go with the game. Like the manual is required, because even like I think there was a part on Zero Mission, I was like slightly confused, and I was like, wait, don't these things have manuals? So I was able to go online, find the PDF for the manual. I was like, oh, yep, this is exactly what I need. I need this specific weapon. Okay, got it. And something as simple as that, or in the case of like a Zork or Deadline, there's actually like clues in the game or in the manual about what you need to be doing in the game, and sort of a colorization of the lore and fleshing out of the universe and all that. That's key to the game. Almost in a way of like the Sherlock Holmes consulting detective type of game, which there is a PC game for, which I'm curious about. But, in that game, you like read newspaper articles and read these different little pamphlets and things like that, all these supplements, like some of those escape room in a box games. And that you've got to have that material to go in and try to solve some of these clues. And I'm like, God, this is very like board gamey. But instead of, pushing pieces around on a table, I've got all of these physical artifacts, these PDF files or little wheels and maps and things like that came with the game that I need to play the game. So I have these real physical objects. You are required to play the game. But then the actual execution of the mechanics is taking place on a screen, so to speak, or with a keyboard. I'm like, yeah, God, there's a real interesting sort of analog digital tension going on here with some of these early games. And I just found it interesting. So I don't know, whatever. I don't really have any concrete thoughts about that, but I was like, these things are not as far apart as I thought they were. And in some, I'll leave you with a kind of a nonsense abstraction, but I'm like, the real problem with the digital thing is really just social media, if you think about it. And I mean that in terms of, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, YouTube even. But also like, online game forums, like that's a form of social media. That's also a big issue. But if you have these little devices here, like the Flip 2 or the, Ambernick, whatever, you're not really online with those. Like if you're on your Flip 2 and you're surfing Facebook, you got an issue, my friend. You got a problem. But I find that, there's no desire when I have this little handheld device and I'm like laying down on the couch or whatever, sitting in the backyard, who knows, and I'm just playing this game. And I'm like, it feels very analog because I'm detached from the online. It's a digital little, ones and zeros little etched thing on this motherboard or this cart that is detached from, the master control of, the online social media nonsense. So to me, even those devices, again, I told you this was going to be a nonsense statement, but even those digital devices with screens doesn't feel digital anymore to me. It feels analog. It's not analog, but it feels analog because it's this crusty artifact of a device that I've loaded up this game from like the 80s on here. And it's like, this is like I've dug this up. There's some archaeology going on here. And then again, with like the Zorks and the Deadlines, you have those physical artifacts that go along with it. So I'm like, okay, in addition to the meeple and the dice and the cube, can you add this digital handheld to that repertoire, this little computerized chip? It feels very like almost post-apocalyptic. Like you've dug up this thing and then you have this little like working device and then you slap it a couple of times and it like comes alive and it like does a couple of things and then it goes away. And then it goes back to the earth, you know what I mean? So it doesn't feel, I don't feel that ickiness that I feel like if I fire up, I don't know, a game. I'll mention a game I actually enjoy. I haven't played it in forever, but World of Warcraft. I don't feel, or Overwatch. I really enjoyed Overwatch back in the day, but I don't feel like that like spider web of downloadable content and microtransactions and Facebook and Instagram and politics, and all that other stuff that like seeps its way. That feels sinister. Like, I don't know, there's a sinisterness to it, to that sort of master control type of online thing. Whereas I don't get that when I have this like little device that's just like, I'm playing Dragon Quest 1 on the Game Boy. Like, I don't know, that's just a different thing. It feels a little bit more wholesome and healthy, actually. Like my brain, after a session of, one of these things I've talked about, it's in a similar spot to my brain after a board game night. Like, honest to God, like there's something about the process of like playing games with friends like that in in person, or even a solo game or whatever. Just, playing an analog sort of board game to playing one of these digital games that's detached from the internet, and it's there's a quirkiness, there's a quaintness to it. It's not like a fully realistic 3D environment either. Like moving these little like pixel characters around, but I get the same sort of like stress relief and easement that I get with with playing board games. So I don't know. This is kind of strange. That's all I gotta say. As a friend of mine likes to say, I don't know what the heck I'm talking about. So anyway, thank you.